Welcome back to the Frontend Coffee Break, the podcast where we talk about front end, and more front end stuff. HTML, JavaScript, CSS. We are from Content Centric, and with me today, as usual, Chucho Castañeda. How are you?
Hello, all good, all good. I mean, enjoying a little bit of coffee and enjoying the season, I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, what's up with your hat? Are we in holiday season now?
Well, I technically were very close around the holiday season, but I'm not entirely sure if that's so. Just in case this episode airs nearby the season, well, I'm dressed for the occasion. If not, well, it's gonna be strange, but
It's just a
still,
hat. It's just a hat,
it's gonna
and
be funny. That's for sure.
And of course, if you know who I am, Ricard Torres, I always never say my name, but I say it now. Anyways, so Chuchi, I wanted to ask you, like you and
Mhm.
I are front-end interviewers, and we do technical interviews. And one of the questions that you see everywhere online, when you look for classical front-end interview questions, is how would you center an element on the page, right? And I know that the question might have been, or the answer might have been different now for several years back. So I wanted to ask you, how would you have done it, like maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago?
Well, 3 or 4 years. I guess back then it was. I think it's already been a while. Well, the answer would be Flexbox. That's the way that I would use it. I would use that because it's the easiest way to align
But that's now. How would
things.
you have done it time
Some years
ago?
ago, I don't
Yeah.
know exactly how long I've been doing it
Mhm.
with Flexbox, but it was way more. Well, way more. It was different because I mean, the easiest way you would say it's like line height. You could just add line height, and that would be it. But then, what happens if the text is too big? Then it would completely break. Then you need to do a certain techniques. Like use a couple of tags. One has a certain line height, the other one has a certain property, and combining this, you can manage to get a very nice, well working vertical alignment. But that is no longer needed. You can reduce the amount of CSS and HTML that you use with just one line of or a couple
Yeah, yeah,
of lines
totally.
of
Or
CSS.
using position absolute or transforming and all those things that we used to do to just, center something in the page. It's just as easy as that.
Hmm. No, and I remember reading about it. There was this book that was called Bulletproof CSS.
All right.
And the idea behind this book is that it told you about different CSS techniques or different things that you could use to make your page bulletproof like this. Like what happens if you reach to a point in which there's too much text. What do you do to avoid the page for breaking in certain situations? It
Right.
was quite interesting. But it's funny how, I mean, right now we still ask this question. The usual answer that we get is flex.
Usually, yes. Yeah.
And but then always, one thing that I like to do is I like to follow up with additional questions like, okay, so if you didn't have flex, how would you center it? And then you can see the difference, I guess, a little bit between people that have a bit more experience than those that don't have a lot of that much experience, because they have different answers. And because precisely people with more experience have had to fight doing different
Mhm.
ways
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
actually do this. But it's funny. It's funny how what was acceptable a few years ago is no longer acceptable, or there are better ways to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you and I are dinosaurs when it comes to web development, and we've seen and we've done very old stuff. I still remember like doing, just having a button and you want the text to be dynamic, but the designer says I want like rounded corners. And
In the
my
rounded
goodness, back then
corners.
you would do a table, right? A table with 4 cells or 5 cells, and then use 4 images to do the corners. And then the browser vendors came and said, "Wait, here's the border radius now. Just use it." Right?
But except Explorer, of course, we'd said, "Oh, border what?
Sure.
Oh, no, 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 this is not gonna be useful." So you had to do it twice because it's like, well, Internet Explorer doesn't support it. Like we don't care. We wanted rounded borders always.
Yeah, yeah.
But how about just doing it for the other browsers? No, it has to be done for every single browser. It's like, okay.
Yeah. So, what are the things that we could recommend our listeners that they should look for or learn or just keep an eye on when it comes to 2023 and CSS? Because, sure, knowing a little bit of Flexbox is fine, but what else is there? Because I think for the past year, past 2 years, we've seen a lot of work from the vendors
Yes.
to improve CSS on the web, and it's fantastic, right?
And especially with the death of Internet Explorer as we knew it. This has become, I think this is something that has improved the things that you can do in the browsers, because before, when you had to support the Internet Explorer because it had a huge
Yeah.
base, you had to do you could not use the latest features,
Hmm.
you would have like the border radius, and it was like, nope, you cannot use it because it's not supported.
Right. You have to polyfill it or send a bunch of code to the client just to do something that you don't really need. I mean, in the end, price of enhancement. So tell me a feature. Tell me something that we should look for.
One thing that I think that's important, because it's something that I'm already working with it, but of course, it's not fully supported, at least not for all the browsers that we have to support in the project, which is container queries.
Ah, nice.
We've had a couple of talks in the company,
Hmm.
internal talks about it, because it's a very interesting topic. I've seen some use cases, super nice use cases, that it's like you grab this one component, and for those who don't haven't worked with container queries, usually we do the media queries, which help us define how a component is going to look depending on the size of the entire window,
Yeah.
because usually we think about mobile, tablet, desktop, or uh, you know
Hmm.
this kind of things. We think about how it's going to behave in these different sizes, window sizes, but usually the component will always behave this way. But then again, it's if you think about it, it's not really that far-fetched to think, well, if my component is using, I don't know, 900 pixels, it'll be like large enough to be able to have uh,
A
um,
wider
yeah,
layout or
a
design. Yeah.
wider layout. And then
Mm.
again, maybe I want to have in a big page,
Mhm.
I don't know, 2000 pixels page, I want to divide it in columns. And if the component is inside one of those columns, I want it to look a bit different, like it would look in a mobile browser.
I
And
mean,
right now,
that's the exact definition of components, right? That you just get the component, an atom, something, and you just put it anywhere, and it looks fine. But now, no, it doesn't work. I mean, currently, we cannot do that.
and it's a different way of thinking, because and the designers are the ones also that need to change the way a little bit of that they think. And I think that it opens the possibilities of new designs hugely in the work that we do in AEM. Now, it's also something that you can apply there, and you can add the component either in different columns, or add the component that it's going to be the entire width. I mean, there's many possibilities. And well, the thing is that container queries, I think it's one of those things that you need to at least read upon, and maybe if even implement via JavaScript. If not, if you cannot, if the browsers that you need to support are not, or
It's
cannot handle
almost
it.
ready. I'm seeing here that we have Chrome, Edge, of course, Safari. We're just missing Firefox and maybe Opera. And then once that is done, we're ready. Let's
I
go.
and I think Firefox is a very important browser to be supported. It's important to support a browser that's not doing the same thing that other browsers are doing. So hopefully, I hope that Firefox supports it. But that would be one of the features that, if you haven't heard of it or if you haven't seen it, go look at it, because it's something that you can implement. Maybe not fully CSS only, but you can also implement it via JavaScript, and it's worth it. I'm currently
Yeah,
working
well,
on
at
a
least maybe in 3 months we'll be ready. So it's
hopefully.
happening. It's happening.
Yeah, and this is something that I'm currently working on, a component that precisely uses via JavaScript,
Mm.
the same thing. And you, Ricardo, what thing would you think?
Yeah, I'm super excited about subgrid. So we
Okay,
have
yeah.
already grids, and I'm surprised that usually when we have interviews with candidates, some people don't even use grid. Like when you tell them how do you do a layout, they say Flexbox.
And this is, well, yeah. There's a reason why we have Flexbox, and we have grids, and a lot of people
Exactly.
use Flexbox as grids.
And
They've
it,
looked.
it works, right? In some
Yes.
way you can do columns, and in some way you can make it work. But in with grid, it's just easier, right? It's easier to just define your columns, put everything there, and work on 2 dimensions, right? Flexbox is for 1 dimension. So with grid, it's fantastic, but designers usually think beyond. It's like they give you a page, they give you a page with 12 columns, they put the component, I don't know, in 5 columns, and then inside the component, they put other elements and say, hey, please make the button start on the third column. But that's not possible because the grid only affects the immediate children, the first children, right?
Hmm.
But with
Hmm.
subgrid, you can now, with children inside the yeah, deeper into the tree, deeper.
Going
Like
deeper.
grandchildren elements can now reference or use the parent grid define. So now you will be able to, yes, I want the button to start on the third column, and this button lives inside 40 divs. That's fine. It's okay. It's going to be fine, and that's something that we will have to like educate also designers and talk to them and say, now we can do this. Let's make use of it, and I think will be much easier for us, because I remember doing hacks with paddings and fixed widths and trying to at least more or less using media queries simulate what they wanted to do. But now I'll know for sure that it's going to work. I'll name my columns, and yeah, I'm super excited.
But one funny thing is that I don't blame those people that say Flex only and
Hmm.
don't use Grid, because at least for me, my personal experience, my personal journey going through Flex and Grid and adopting them
Hmm.
was very late, long, like not late. Well, yeah, I'm a late adopter. Of layouts. I must confess that I was a late adopter. Part of the reason that of this is because, well, I started working. I mean, I started using tables for layouts when
Yeah,
it was
same here.
acceptable. I mean,
Hmm.
this is something that we've all, I
Hmm.
guess,
We've been
done.
there.
We've been there. I mean, literally the table, because it was so easy to do layouts with tables. And then if correct me if I'm wrong, because I would say that this is the next step after tables came floating,
Yeah,
and you
float left,
started
float
to
right, clear floats. Yeah, yeah.
clears and floats, and that would you have to struggle a lot with floats, and then sometimes a little bit of um, positioning in
Yeah,
order
yeah,
to
yeah.
make it work. I mean,
Totally.
and then what did came along? And I think I jumped from this kind of layout definition, floats
Hmm.
and this
Hmm.
kind of things, into Flex
Yeah, yeah.
afterwards, and Grid. But it took me some time, because it's like, no, I already know how to do this. I know how to do it. It works perfectly fine. I don't see any reason why to use something like Flex.
No, but I feel you. I mean, especially us that we're working with enterprise and working on large projects, we need to support lots of browsers usually. It's not, I mean, I envy those developers in startup companies where they work on a small project and they say, yeah, I only use the latest Chrome and Firefox. And I'm like, you are so lucky. We, we cannot
Yes.
do that usually with enterprise projects. And I think that's one of the reasons why sometimes we as developers hold off on features, because we know, okay, do I need to polyfill it? I mean, do I need to send more code when I'm trying to use less code? Doesn't make any sense, right? So maybe.
And that's something that right there, that right there, I think is one of the essential things of being able to adopt new features, that they not only they're easier sometimes to use, but sometimes this the fact that they're easier to use make means that they use less code. You need less
Yeah,
code, so you send
totally.
less code to the browser, and that's good for performance wise. At least
Yeah,
it
with
helps
with,
out.
with grids, man, grid. It's just with three properties you can define a whole grid system, and they're done. With floats, you would have to create a class for each of the columns and the width of each column, and it's crazy.
No,
Yeah,
and the funny thing is that grid is magic.
yeah,
Well,
yes, it
Xbox
is.
is also magic. At least it looks like magic. If you had to fight the doing it without it, now when you use it, it's just magic. It
Yeah,
just
man,
works. Like
it's
you go flex, flex, flex if you want, or grid or whatever. And it's, I mean, this is something that I don't see. I would go back in time and slap myself and say, start using it. It's gonna make your life easier.
yeah, yeah.
Let
And for those
I
listening at home, just visit if you can small css.dev, small with O, small css.dev, and they have there like one-liners to create grid systems with flexbox and grid.
ah.
And it's just almost a one-liner. It's so small, so easy, and I'm so surprised like how far we've come from the old layout system.
And for those that don't know it yet and want to learn it, there's a lot of very nice resources, like the what was it called? I know that it was the Grid Frog, the CSS Grid Frog. I think
Ah,
that's
like a
one,
game. Yeah,
or,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
was it the Flexbox Frog and the CSS Garden? No, there was another page, the Grid Garden, I think it was, and it helps you.
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
But there were two very very good websites that help you to learn how to use
Mhm.
Flex and how to use Grid. So if you're a little bit afraid of doing that, well, that's something that you can that you can go to and look. And we even have one of our colleagues that did in Cognizant Centric that did a CS grid tutorial, and it's available in Udemy. We can also maybe link it so that if you're interested.
Yeah, we'll do that.
And but anyhow, I have to say that I before we continue, I had a horror story. I know I just need to take
Oh,
it out of my chest.
all right.
I had a horror story regarding layouts, and it was I joined a project many years ago, and I started looking at the project. We worked a lot with tables because it was table data, and I was looking at it, and I saw they were only using divs, and everything was floated. I mean, it was we would say a work of art or a Frankenstein. I don't know, but it was like a very complex work to make it to using only floats make the behavior of tables. And of course, this had a lot of issues because they're not tables. That's what tables are for. But I went to the project lead and I said, "Hey, why are you using divs here? Why are you using divs instead of tables?" And he looked at me and said, "Well, we read an article and it said that we should avoid the use of tables if possible." And I was like, when no, I mean, yes, it's true, you should, when you're not painting tabular data, then you should use tables because that's the best way. I mean, they went all the way and removed every single table from the project in a project that was that had a lot of information that had to be shown in tables. It was horrible. The bugs that had to be fixed were horrible. And I guess that's one of the reasons that I said no flex, because I've been battling using floats. Anyhow,
No, it's a good one. I mean, and to be devil's advocate, the issue is sometimes the designs, right? I mean, I have the same user story for my current project right now, where we had the requirement to make some sort of component that it's very like responsive, right? On mobile is very vertical, and then on desktop is very horizontal. But that's tabular data, and of course, using tables was very challenging, and we didn't go for tables at the moment, right? But then once we explored more about accessibility and we ran some accessibility audits, they said, okay, yes, we need tables, right? So now there's going to be a challenge on how do you migrate to tabular data with actual tables and make it responsive while maintaining the design. Maybe that's not even feasible, right? Because if you're working on a more vertical, more different layout, maybe if you're working on tables, it's tables, right? So how do you deal with that? Do you have some sort of overflow and make a horizontal scroll bar, or how do you deal with that? It's not easy.
not an easy thing, but it's not. Fortunately, right now, at least I don't have to worry about that, so I'm happy.
Lucky man, lucky man. I'll ping you later next week about this.
So another feature that I think that it's important. It's an old feature, I must say, but when we were discussing it earlier before the show, I mentioned something that I found out a couple of years ago. The client said, "Hey, we found out this," and also one of our performance experts mentioned it at one point in an internal channel, and it's content visibility. And this property it's very nice in the sense that you could use this property to basically improve the performance of the page, and it was like an easy win, or at least the way that they told us about it is like, this is an easy win. And I'm going to tell you why this is something that should be kept in mind, but it's not, I think, necessarily ready to be used, or at least it wasn't last year that I tried to use it.
So this thing controls how the elements are rendered, or how does it?
Yes,
Okay.
it precisely affects the way that the rendition. It basically what it does is, one of the things that you can do with it is that you can tell the browser not to worry about rendering, or basically rendering content if it's not visible at this point. So this means that, for example, when you load the page, it will only worry about rendering what is visible, and whatever is not visible, it won't be rendered until it sort of becomes visible. So it does improve the performance. Remember, our performance expert said, "Hey, if you use it, it will improve." I don't remember the amount, but it said like it's an easy win because you just need to put it like on the top level, and it's going to improve the performance quite nicely. So we implemented it, but while working on it, we find out that it had a very big issue. But going back a little bit, and the nice thing is that if a browser didn't support it, it was okay because it just would be ignored and worked as usual, business as usual. But the thing is that um, the main browser that we used for the client was Chrome, and the issue was that our client was very keen into accessibility, into making the website accessible, and this particular property had an accessibility issue that basically it rendered invisible certain elements for the screen reader, and this was not good because if I remember correctly, it was like, for example, the headings. It would not be able to find the headings that hadn't been rendered, and that became a big accessibility issue. And reading about it, the thing that happened is that this was not a desired effect. It was a side effect that well, it was a bug. It was not a feature. And the Chrome team found out. It's like, yeah, we know that it's currently not working. This is not what we intended, so we have to work on it. And that was at least, if I remember, February 2021 when we tried
But
to use
again,
it.
devil's advocate, if I don't care about accessibility, or should I care about, maybe different topic, but maybe if I don't care, or if it's an internal portal just for me, maybe it's
Okay,
fine.
I mean, I think that it's very important for people to care for accessibility.
Yeah,
I mean, at least the most basic, and also usually when you do things right, a lot of accessibility things are just
they just
that.
work.
Yes, they just work, but you should worry about accessibility, or at least basic accessibility.
Mm,
And I think this one is it's a big thing because it would render your content invisible to screen readers, and
yeah.
that's not something that you want. I mean, in other things, I might say, okay, maybe you can ignore it because it's not that such of a big deal. I mean, there's things that, being a little bit of a, yeah, of a not such a nice person, you could say yes, we can ignore it. Of course, there's use cases like you say, this is an internal portal and we know that we don't need it, or we don't want it, or whatever. Yeah, I guess you can go ahead and use it, and then Santa Claus won't bring you gifts because you're being a bad person.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, if the moment that they fix this is something I have to check. I haven't checked it. It's fixed. But the moment that they fix this, it's something that I would really recommend to be implemented. Like, immediately go implement it and use it, because it's really performance wise, it's quite nice. And
Yeah.
any other thing that you would say that's worth learning this year?
Learning many things, to be honest. There are two things I like. They're not super ready to use, but I wanted to mention them because just keep an eye on out. Keep an eye out. There's two like selectors or pseudo class selectors. One is
Mm.
the has, right, and
Okay.
the other
Oh,
there is the
cool.
where.
Yep.
And it has been a revolution. I mean, we've never been able to select like from a pattern element, right? So like based on children, and using the has is mind blowing because it's so new and something that you would never expect, or maybe you wanted to have it and you would use JavaScript, right? Because if, like, let's say you say, okay, I want to change how you have some links, but you want to change how the wrapper on the link based on the link, right? So with JavaScript, you would create a link and then you would go up to the tree and say parent or closest selector, and you would go up, right? But now you don't have to use
Yep.
JavaScript. You can use CSS, or now means quote unquote now means Chrome, Edge, Safari, and Opera. I see that Firefox has not still implemented
Mm.
has. But yeah, I mean, have you read about has?
Has is one of those things that people ask Santa on their wish list every year.
Yes.
I mean, this is a feature that everyone has wanted for
Mm,
so long.
yeah.
And I think that when it initially came out, it was a bit of a, how is this possible? Because it's
Yeah.
supposed to be like super heavy for processing wise. I mean, this
Correct.
is it,
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing to do, and that was the reason that this thing that was really would have been really, or it's really appreciated, wasn't implemented earlier, because it was well, anyhow. But I know about has. I haven't tried it out yet.
No, same here because support, right? You cannot
Yes,
just in Firefox. It's a
but
very
the
big
moment
deal.
that it's supported,
Hmm.
this is one of those things that changes completely the, I mean, it, once again, performance. It reduces the amount of code that you have to do, especially JavaScript. I mean, there's a lot of things, we talked about it. It's that there's a lot of things you can do with CSS that you don't realize you can do with CSS and
Yeah.
reduce
Mhm.
JavaScript. And anything that's like that, it's marvelous.
And the second thing is the where selector. So colon where and then parentheses. This is where, okay, pun intended. So let's say that you have, okay, very easy. You have like a class and then child element. comma, and then you have class, another element, class, title, class description. You have a bunch of things that are children of your class, right? And then you usually write it in multi-line. You have one line, two lines, three lines. But with the where, you convert this to a one-liner. You just say class where, and then you put title, paragraph, and button, and all those styles apply to those elements, right? So I like it in a sense that maybe if this comes to SaaS and you say, okay, I want to have now this support because I want to please compile my SaaS files to CSS using this feature, your CSS files will immediately be smaller because now you would just have it, okay, comma, 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 whatever. But maybe using this where you would by like for free, you would have less
For free.
less CSS output, and I like it. It's nice.
And well, now that you mentioned SaaS, I mean, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of things that we do in SaaS
Hmm.
that that allows us to be more productive or help us reduce the amount of time that we have to invest in things. But then they ended up doing maybe a lot of more writing a lot of more code. But this is definitely something that
And have you noticed that now the CSS spec is becoming more and more like SaaS? I mean, we've had
yes.
now the custom properties, so-called quote unquote CSS variables, right? Also
Hmm.
like nesting. Now
Yes.
you can have nesting on vanilla CSS.
And they were I remember that we had a poll regarding on because there was two options regarding the nesting, right? It was
Yes.
like which how's it called?
Which
Semantic
one
object?
has won?
Which
It's a good question. I think
I think it was the
they've
SaaS
changed it.
one.
They've changed it. Let me see if MDN quickly, just for you guys.
But well,
Nesting.
the thing is
Yeah.
that yeah, it was like how would CSS natively support nesting? And
Hmm.
there were two options, and I remember that that there were people that wanted one, people that wanted the other. I personally wanted the one that was like more like SaaS because
The
that's the
ampersand. Yes, I think that's the one that won. Yeah, ampersand.
hmm,
So yeah.
because I mean, and this happens the same thing as we've talked about it in JavaScript. That there's a lot of features, frameworks, and libraries that are created that add features to JavaScript that are not available otherwise, and they end up being incorporated naturally and natively
jQuery.
in
jQuery.
JavaScript.
The same
Exactly,
thing. Yeah.
and with the CSS, the
Hmm.
same thing happens. As the same thing happens. You mentioned some of these features that end up being
Yeah.
implemented natively. And I guess that this would be a point in favor of learning things like SAS or something, these CSS preprocessors. Like a lot of the features might end up being native in the future, and
Hmm.
it's nice. I mean,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
for example, one thing that I was thinking about is maybe right now the media queries. You know,
Hmm.
they've included the media query range, which
Yeah.
is something also relatively new, which reduce or changes the way that we can add ranges in media queries, making it more natural. And this is something that you maybe could have implemented or implemented in SAS yourself, create a mixing
Function.
or a
Yeah.
function or
Hmm.
something
Yeah.
that made it easy. And now with the ranges, it's something that it's already also being made easy, and this is something
Totally.
that's worth looking into if you haven't done it yet.
It doesn't mean that we're going to drop like SAS
No,
as a
no, 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 no,
preferred
no.
tool for development, but I think it's nice that we are updating the CSS spec so that there will be less and less like compilation from SAS files to CSS, and in the end, more performant and less output. And yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, very good, man.
No, and this might allow for the future for SAS to become even or add other features that we might
Hmm.
not be thinking of right now. I mean, the sky in a way is the limit. I Although I'm more into using SAS, for example, I do also like some of the things that you can do in post CSS. You know, because it allows you to programmatically do a few tricks.
Different things, yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
so you can implement some other things that you wanted to do, and they can be naturally be
Hmm.
done in post CSS. So that's also a nice thing to at least to get to know, because maybe you'll have a need at one point to do things one way or another, and post CSS might be the answer, or might be able to help you out. I don't know.
Chucho, anything else you want to share about CSS for this 2023?
I don't have anything else in mind, at least not from the top of my head.
Then we ask the listeners, please share what's the most exciting
Hmm.
CSS feature or change, or something that is not in CSS and you would like to see it in CSS. What are you looking for this year regarding CSS?
Or the
Share it.
thing that yeah, or the thing that you've learned recently and that blew your mind and would say, oh, it's nice that it's implemented.
Please don't say border radius. That's it, guys.
Calc, calc.
calculations. Yeah, that's also nice. Next episode. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.